Hi and welcome to this DCP web tutorial. In today's tutorial, we'll be using Blender 2.8 to create this text cinematic intro. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up Blender. And I'm just going to click on General here like usual. I'm going to press the letter N to turn on my screencast keys, just so that you can see what keys I'm pressing down here. I'm going to click on this cube and hit the delete key, select this light source and hit the delete key, middle mouse click and then press Shift and A, and I want to insert a text object. Where's the text? Here it is. I'll press number 7, that takes me into the top view. I can press the tab key or go to object and go to edit mode. That allows me to edit this text. I'm going to type in cinematic. You can type in anything you like, type your company name, your name, whatever you want. Just type some text in there. Try not to make it too long. You want something like one word maybe will be a good idea, or 2 short words, something like this. Let's click on the text object data here for this text. It's selected because it's highlighted in this sort of orange highlight around it, so you know it's selected and it's also orange here. Let's go to the geometry. Let's middle mouse click so we can see it at an angle. We need to see it at an angle, and we want to extrude it to around let's see, around 0.15. that sort of thickness. Something like this can be a little bit thicker, a little bit thinner, it's entirely your choice. Set the depth of the bevel to 0.02, and then we want to press number 7. That takes us back into the top view. Let's go ahead and open up the web browser. Inside the web browser I want to download this font. I'll put a link to this font in the YouTube description. So I can click download and you'll see a link to this same font here in the YouTube description. You can also pick a different font if you want. You don't have to use this particular one. It's entirely your choice. So just do a browse on this website and find another font. You really want something that's got quite a thick edge rather than something that's very narrow. So something like this font is pretty good. Let's minimize this, open up this folder. We've just downloaded this font. I'm going to right click and extract it. I'll delete the zip file and just rename this folder font. And we just got the font inside of there. So let's close this folder and open up Blender, and we'll click on this text. It's selected. Go to the font options here in regular. I'm going to click the open folder and go to my desktop. Let's go to this project, go into the font folder, and I'll select this particular font and click open. Now you can see that font's been applied to the text. I'm going to go to file, save as, and I want to save this as let's call this text intro-01. So let's call it text intro 01. We'll save that. Now with this text here, the gap in between the font is quite tight. You can see where it's almost like overlapping. We don't want that. So let's scroll down here, and in the character spacing I'm just going to set it to 1.2. so there's a gap, a good gap in between each one of the text here. Let's click on this object, the text object, go to object, set origin, geometry to origin. So that will just center out the text. It will put the origin point right in the center of this text object. Let's press number 1. That takes us into the front orthographic, and we want to press the letter R, then the letter X. Wait, let's see, R to rotate, then X, and then type in 90. That just rotates this object. If you click here, you'll see that it's just rotated it 90 degrees here. And let's zoom out a little bit with our mouse. So we use the mouse wheel to zoom out a bit. Let's press Control Alt and 0. Control Alt 0 will move the camera to the front perspective. So now we're looking directly at this text object. We want to rotate downwards a little bit. In fact, let's leave it at 90 degrees for the moment. 90 is fine. Let's go to Edit and we'll go to Preferences. Inside Preferences, click Key Map, and then inside the name here, type in Fly, F-L-Y, and then for the view navigation fly and walk, the keyboard shortcut, click here. It says press a key, click here, and then press Shift and F, and that will set a hotkey for this action, Shift F. So if we click on the camera now and press Shift and F key, we can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out and just get the text roughly where we want it. We want it to be roughly positioned around here, and then on the X value here we want to set that to 0. That will make sure it's nice and centered out, and we want to look slightly towards the top. So what we want to do is move the Z downwards a bit, or move it like this, and then we want to rotate it, let's see, we want to rotate it this way. Let's rotate it to around 84 degrees. Let's set it to 84, and then we can just move the camera up a little bit. And that's just looking down at the text. Now you can just see like the top edge of this text. we want to be looking down at it slightly at an angle, just like this. We can adjust that a little bit more later. The Y value is just the moving the camera backwards and forwards, right? So we can just set that to -14 for now. We want to move this down, move it up slightly. Try and get your text sort of in the middle of the height of the camera. Now, let's middle mouse click, so we'll come at the camera view. Let's press, what we want to do now is really create an object, and we want to create some particle emitters. So what we'll do is press Shift and A, go to Mesh, and insert a UV sphere. So we'll press S to scale, and let's scale down this UV sphere. Let's scale it down, and then let's press number 7. Let's press G to grab it and move it so that it sits in front of the text. Somewhere around here should be good. On the X, we'll set it to 0. So set the X value here to 0, and on the Z value, we'll set it to 0 as well. The Y value doesn't matter too much. You can move it backwards or forwards. Roughly around here should be pretty good. You know, about almost like 1 block away. Let's press S to scale and scale it down some more. Press 0, that will take us into the camera view. We can see that object now. And I think, let's just middle mouse click. Let's press number 1. 1 is probably the best view to see it from the front orthographic, nice and flat. And I think we need to scale it down a little bit more, roughly to around this size. That size is 0.0, let's set it to 0.0, let's set it to 0.115. So we'll copy that and put it onto the Y. Let's just make them all the same, 0.115. Let's press Ctrl S to save it. Then we want to duplicate this object once, so press Shift and D. In fact, before we duplicate it, let's name it. So let's call this particle controller. Now we want to duplicate it once, so let's click on it, press Shift and D to duplicate it, press G to grab it, then Z and move it upwards so that it sits just above, just a little gap in between it, yeah? And then we want to reduce this size of this top one. Let's press S to scale and scale it down, and then we'll press G to grab, then Z and move it down a bit to about here, roughly around this sort of position. And we're going to name this one particle top. Let's call it particle emitter top. That's a good name for it. Now we're going to duplicate this one, so let's select it, press Shift and D to duplicate it. You can see there's a copy in there now, right? And we want to just click on it, press G to grab it, then Z and move it below in the same similar position but below, around here. And then let's rename this one to, let's make it obvious, let's call it bottom. Sphere particle B-O-T-T-O-M, bottom. Right, now what we would do is click on this object, press Shift and D to duplicate it again, press G to grab it, then Z and move it above here somewhere. And that is this copy here. It's got 001 written at the end of it. Let's call this particle 1. Call it particle 1. Then click on it, press Shift and D to duplicate it again, and then press Shift and D to duplicate it one more time. So let's click on this one and call it particle 2. And then click on this one here and name it particle 3. Click on particle 2, press G to grab it, then X and move it to the side a little bit. Click on particle 3, press G to grab it, then X and move that to here. You just got them sitting 1, 2 and 3 nicely in sequence, and it makes sense, right? Let's go into render view, press Ctrl S to save, click on the first one, go to the material, copy this name particle 1, so just select it, Ctrl C to copy, click new, name the material particle 1. It's always worth naming your materials the same as what the object is if possible, yeah? We'll save headache later. Click here and go to emission, set the value here strength to 10, and then choose any sort of green color, any of these greens. Preferably start from the top, roughly closer to the blue, so somewhere around here, and then click on the next one. That's called particle 2. Click new, paste in the name but change it to 2, and then go to here, go to emission, set it to value of 10, and then pick a mid green, one somewhere around the middle here. Then click on the third one, click new, paste it, name it 3, so it's named the same as the object. Click here, go to emission, click here and set a bottom color, maybe like this one, and then give that a value of 10 as well. Let's go to file save and then go to file save as, and let's save this as version 2 and click save. I'm just going to turn back on my screencast keys, make sure they're working. And now what we want to do is group these into a collection. So let's click up here, right click and click new, and here you have a new collection. Let's name this collection particles, and then click on the first one, hold down the shift key and select the other two and drag them into the particle collection. Make sure they get dragged in there, because if you minimize this they'll be hidden, right? Then you know that they're in there, have to be in there. Let's click on this top circle or this top sphere. In fact, that's named bottom, right? And this one I guess is named top. So actually named the wrong way around. So let's copy this one, it's called bottom, and let's just copy that name and let's paste it into here, and let's just call it bottom 1 for the second, and let's rename this bottom one here, and let's call it top, and then we can rename this and just call it bottom here. There was named the wrong way around basically. Just let's make it correct. So let's click on this top one. This is actually the top one here. Let's go to the particle settings, click new particle settings here, and we want to set the lifetime to set the lifetime to 10, set the end to 240, and let's see, we want to go to velocity and set this value to 0.1, and then we want to go to render. Inside render, under halo here, click it and select collection. Underneath this collection here where it says instance, click here and select particles, and then tick off the pick random and set the random scale all the way to the top. Go to the field weights here and set the gravity all the way down, and let's click play, and now we can see particles being emitted from here, and they are probably a little bit too small. Let's see what happened here. Let's see, I'm not sure why they're getting emitted up here. Let's just pause this and go back. So let's do one thing. Let's go to file, save, and let's just play this. So they're being emitted up here. I think there's a few bugs in Blender. Let's pause this and go back. Let's go to file, open, and open this version 2. We saved it, now let's open it again. Let's just click play. So they're getting emitted from up here for some reason. There's no particle system attached to it, so that's a bit strange. Let's see what's going on here. Maybe I did something wrong here. Let's have a look. Let's go to collection, particles. Let's see, that's correct. Okay, maybe there's a naming issue here, right? So because this is called particles, this is called particle, maybe there's a conflict in naming here somewhere. So let's just try and name this collection something slightly different. Let's call it particles group or something like this. Let's just try and name it particles group. So it's called particle group here. Let's just see if that was a problem. Let's save this, click play. It's still being emitted up here for some reason. Let's see. You can see them being emitted here, but they should be coming off of this object here. So it's doing something very strange. Let's save this. Let's pause this and go back. Let's see what's going on wrong here. So everything seems okay here. The velocity seems fine. Let's just collection here, particles. Let's just turn off global coordinates. Let's see. Okay, I had to turn off global coordinates. Maybe I ticked that by accident. That's what was causing the problem. Can you see here? So turn that off, tick that off. Now you can see the particles being emitted from here. So we win some, we lose some sometimes. So let's go to file, save. And what we want to do is apply this particle system to the bottom one. So let's click on it, hold down the shift key and click on the top one. So left click on the bottom one first. Let's just turn on my screencast keys, make sure they're on. Yeah, let's left click on the bottom one, hold down the shift key, click on the top one, and then in this drop down select copy active to selected object. Now they'll both inherit the same particle system. Now this is, I think this is a bug in Blender, but you can see they're behaving differently, right? If I go into render view, you can see this one's flying out a little bit, but this one's kind of stuck to the object. Now the only way I could figure out how to fix that is to go to File, Save As, and save it as a new version. Save it as version 3. Click Save, then go to File, Open, and open version 3. Open the one that you've just saved. Now if we go back into Render View and click Play, you can see they're both behaving the same. Why it does that, I think it's a little bug, I'm not quite sure. I haven't worked it out, but that seems to fix the problem. So if you're facing that problem, if you're ever using particles and one's behaving differently, even though you copied it over, then that might be a problem. Just to go and save the work as a new file and then reopen it, and it should be fine. So now that I've reopened it, let me just make sure my screencast keys are on. Let's just see, they're on. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to, let's see, we really want to parent these objects together. So what we want to do is we want to select this middle sphere last. So let's click on the top one, let's click on the bottom one here, and then click on the middle one last. It's important that you click the middle one last. Doesn't matter which one you select, or the top or the bottom first, but make sure you click, preferably click the top one first, hold down the shift key, click on the bottom one, then click on the middle one last, press Ctrl and P, and then select object. Now these two objects at the top and bottom will follow this middle object. So if I were to click on the middle one, even the top two ain't selected, if I press G to grab it, you'll see they'll move. The two spheres, they'll move with it, right? Now if I click on this middle one and click on this little drop down arrow, you'll see the particle top and bottom are sitting inside of this controller. So they're almost following whatever the controller does. These two objects will follow. So if we move this middle sphere, the top and the bottom one will move with it, which means the particles will move with it as well. So what we want to do now is press number 7, take us into the top view. Let's press Shift and A, and we want to insert a circle. So here's a circle. Let's just press G to grab it and try and center it out as best as possible. In fact, what we can do is click here and set the X, the Y, and the Z location all to 0. Just set them all to 0. I think I moved this 3D cursor. If you click here, and you may not have to do that. If your 3D cursor is in the middle, you can just leave it, but I think I just want to click it here. That way, that wherever you place this 3D cursor, that's where the object will get generated. So I just want to click it in the middle for future reference if I need it. Let's click back on the arrow select option. Let's click on this circle. Let's see, where is it in here? It's called Bezier circle. We want to call this particle. Let's rename this circle to particle path. Let's call it particle path. And right now it's sitting inside the particle group. We don't want that. Let's drag it to the top collection. So we don't want it sitting in this collection. That's just for particles only. So click on the top collection, make sure the particle path is sitting in this top collection. Let's go to Object Edit Mode, and this is the sphere in Edit Mode. Let's left click outside to unselect everything. We'll click on the left side here, hold down the Shift key and click on the right side. Press S to scale and scale it out. And scale it out so that it's wider. It's got more width than the text inside. You can see the text here, right? Maybe solid view will be a bit easier. So we want to make sure our circle is wider than the edge of this text here. Let's go back into render view. Then we're going to click this one here. In fact, left click outside, you see unselect everything, click the top one and then click the bottom one. Hold the Shift key when you do that, and then press S to scale and scale it in a bit so that it sits quite close to the edge. Get it quite close around here. It's going to be like this figure 8 sort of shape, right? Something like that. Let's go back into object mode, and it's aligned nicely, right? It's right in the sort of center of the text. Now what we want to do is go to File, Save As, and save this as version 4. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is press number 7. That takes us into the top view. So what we can do is what we want to do is actually get this particle controller to follow the path of this figure 8 shape. So let's click on the particle controller, go to the constraints, and inside the constraints click follow path, and inside this drop down select particle path. Now this object will be connected to this path. So if we were to change the offset, you can see it's moving with it, right? So set the offset here to 0, set the offset value to 0. Let's click on this particle controller and we want to move it closer to this line. So press the letter G, then Y, and move it closer to the line. It doesn't have to be overlapping it, maybe just on the outside, somewhere around here. And now when we offset and move it, you can see it's going to rotate around. Probably we'll be better off actually putting it just on the line. So let's zoom in. Let's press G to grab it, then Y, and move it so the dot is really sitting right on the line. That way when it gets to here, it's not going to get too close. So let's just move the offset and see. So when it gets around the back, it's not going to be too close, like overlapping the text. It's going to rotate all the way around. So let's set that value to 0. This value was set to 0. Let's go to the first frame and hit the record button. Let me just turn on my screencast keys. Let's make sure they're on for you. And then, so you can see my key presses here, yeah? Now, what we want to do is, let's just do that again. So just hit the record button, go to the first frame, click on this particle controller, and make sure you're inside the constraints, and we want to press the letter I on offset here. Then go to the last frame, frame 250, and press the letter I, then set the value here to 100. So if we go back to the first frame and untick the record button, now this object will move around this trajectory like this. Okay, it can be a little bit glitchy, but we should be able to fix that. So let's go to the first frame. Let's go to File, Save As, and save this as version 5, and click Save. And then we're going to middle mouse click. We want to click on this particle controller. Again, go to the object data here, hit the record button, and in the rotation press the letter I here, and go to the very last frame on frame 250 and press the letter I here as well. And then in the rotation for the X, we want to set it to 1140. 1140, go to File, Save, and then click on this drop down here, this arrow, and then we can click on the particle bottom emitter, go to the particle settings, and for now we're just going to bake it. So we need to go to the cache. Let's find the cache here and click Bake All Dynamics, and then click on the particle top emitter and click Bake All Dynamics. When you click this Bake All Dynamics, what Blender will do is create a cache file. So if we were to minimize this and look inside here, we should see, actually we don't see the bake in here. Normally see a bake in here, but I think it's baked into maybe this file here, somewhere in here. Normally there's a separate bake file, but I don't see one. So probably because this particle system is quite basic. Let's go to File, Save, and let's just untick the record button, go to the first frame. Let's press the letter 0 so we can see it from the camera view. Right, this is the camera here, and let's click play and let's see what happens. So these and that, this sphere is now rotating. If we turn off our overlays, it might be a bit easier to see. But the sphere is rotating, and the particle control is following that path, right? With these particles being emitted from these two objects. Now obviously if we were to go and hit, let's just move forward a few frames to like around here, something like this. Let's just see around here, and hit the F12 button, we can see all of those three objects are being rendered out in the viewport, in the actual final render, and these objects here. So what we want to do is, let's just middle mouse click to get out of the camera view. Let's select these three objects. So let's press, let's turn back on our overlays. Let's press B to box select, the letter B. We can draw around these objects and then zoom right out and press G to grab them, then Z and move the three little objects. I think we've also selected this by accident. So let's do this from here. Let's click here, select all three of these. So I'll click the first one, hold the shift key to select all three of them, then press G to grab, then Z, and move those particles way up, really high up, right? Even further than that. G to grab. Well, actually that should be fine, because we just don't want to see them in the viewport, or when we're doing our render, we don't want to see them. Now if we click this this option here, what we want to do is click the render option here and this little camera here, and we want to hide, let's just minimize this, we want to hide the controller from the final render and also from the viewport here. You can actually leave it in the in the viewport just for reference, but if we were to press F12 now, you can see that circle in the middle has disappeared, right? The sphere. Now we just want to get rid of these two little emitters from the render. To do that, let's click on the particle emitter here, bottom one, go down to here, and inside render we want to turn off show emitter, and then inside the particle top here we'll also want to turn off show emitter. So when we press F12 now we just see particles on their own, and we'll see the animation, but we'll have hidden those objects from the final render, right? So let's go ahead and click on this cinema text, and what we want to do, let's think about this. I think the smart thing for us to do is to add our lighting behind this text first. So let's go to File, Save As. Let's save this as version 6, and then press Shift and A, and we want to insert a light, which will be a spotlight. The spotlight at the moment is facing downwards. Let's press number 3 on our keyboard. Number 3 will take us into the right orthographic, and our camera is here. You see our camera here? Right here. So we want to move this light source behind the text. So let's press G to grab it, then Y, and move it behind the text. We can see our text object here, right? And what we want to do is probably just press G to grab it and move it down a little bit. Then we want to rotate it so it faces the text. So we want to rotate it on the X, and we want to rotate it -90. Let's do -90 for the minute. So now this light source is pointing behind the text. Let's press 0 on our keyboard, and then we want to press Shift and A to insert a mesh plane. So we've got a plane here. Let's press S to scale it and keep scaling it. Let's see. We really want this to be below, right? So let's just scale it to this size. What size is that? Let's set it to 7 here for the moment. 7, 7, and 7 for the minute. And we want to drag this so it sits below the text. Let's press G to grab it, then Z, and drag it so that it's down below the text. Best way to do that probably is number 3. Because if you go into number 3 view, which is the right orthographic, you can see what gap is below the text here. You want to move it up a little bit. So let's press G to grab X. Let's just move it up slightly. You want a small gap here, right? A little gap here. Let's press 0. That takes us back into the front camera view, and we really want to rotate this camera. It's not at the right angle, so let's click on it. Let's go to the settings here, and we want to rotate it upwards a bit, and then bring the camera down. We want to try and get, where's our plane? Our plane is here. We really want our plane to be cutting through the middle of the text like this. We also want to make that plane bigger, so let's press S to scale it, and make sure that we scale it so it sits past the camera view here, and try and get that plane to be cutting sort of through the text in the middle, somewhere like that. Could be a bit lower, so you could just move the camera really. Click on the camera. Let's just move the camera a little bit to around here. So you can play around with the settings, just get it roughly where you want, and then we want to click on this text. Maybe we should set our light source up first. So let's do one thing. Let's go to the world settings, and in the color here, let's set it to black. Then let's go to our shading and go into the render view and press the letter 0. Let's zoom in a little bit here, and then go into the world settings. And inside the world settings, we're going to press Shift A and insert a shader volume scatter and drag that to here. We'll set the density to 0.015, and we're going to set the value here to 0.2. Then let's go back to our layout. Let's just see what's going on here. Let's just see. Okay, let's press 0 for the minute. Let's go to, let's see where our, let's have a look. This is our spotlight right here. Let's minimize this collection here, or this control. Let's minimize it. Let's click on the spotlight, go to its settings, and we're going to change this to like a green color, and then we want to set its value to, let's say, around 1500. So you're going to get this sort of dramatic light now, yeah? But it's not quite right, so what we want to do is click on the spotlight. Let's go to its settings. I think we need to rotate this maybe slightly. One thing we need to do is go into the render view, and we need to turn on bloom here, and we need to go to volumetrics and set the tile size to 4, and make sure we turn on volumetric shadows as well. And we set the samples, we can leave them at 16, that should be fine. The render view 64, we want to set this to 96. And in the output settings, we want to set it to 30 frames a second, right? Now, really, let's just see. Let's just make sure we got this right. This looks pretty good, but we're not really seeing much of the text over here. It's quite hidden, isn't it? We're not seeing all of the words. So let's try and sort that out. So let's see, let's click here. And what we want to do, let's try and go to the spotlight. Let's just increase its radius. Let's see if we can get that to help us a bit here. Really want to increase the size here. That's what we want to do, right? Let's increase the size to around, let's set it to around 100. Let's set it to 100. And then really it's about playing with the radius. We don't really want it to be too, we don't want this like bright light down here. So we want to increase the radius to just fade that out a bit. And the power might be a bit too strong. Let's set it to around 1000. In fact, I think 1500 was pretty good. Let's click on this text here. Let's go to the settings here. Let's go to new, and let's call this material text. And the base color I want to set it to almost like a grey, just like a silvery sort of grey. And then the metallic I want to turn that up, and the specular I want to bring that down a bit, and the roughness I want to bring down as well. Choose something, let's see, somewhere around here. Let's just turn off our overlays. Now we can see the text and see what it looks like. Still this letter C on the ends, you can't really see it too well. So let's go back to our spotlight and let's try and increase the size a bit to somewhere around here. Let's press F12 to do a test render. Now you can see the text, but you can't see the objects, right? We don't want them other objects being rendered out in the scene. So I think this is pretty good. We can probably improve this a little bit. Let's go to File, Save As, and save it as version 7 for now. Okay, let's go over to the render settings here. And inside the render settings, let's turn on screen space reflections. Let's open up the options, turn off half trace, set the trace position all the way up to the top. Now, click on the plane and label that floor, F-L-O-O-R, floor. And we'll click on floor and go to material. Let's click new material and paste in the word floor here. Give it the same name as the object. And we want to set the metallic all the way up to the top and set the roughness to 0.015. That's a bit too low. We want to set it to, let's see, 0.15. So we set it to 0.15 here and set the specular all the way down. So that's going to give us some improvements on our lighting, and now we can get the reflections here on the floor. So really we should save this. Let's go to File, Save As, and we'll save it as version 8. Okay, so let's go ahead and animate our cameras. So the first thing I want to do is go to the very first frame. So I'm on the first frame here. Let's go ahead and click on the record button. Let's zoom out on the viewport a little bit so we can see the camera here. Let's click on the camera and press the letter 0. Make sure you press 0 and you see from the camera perspective. So I want to go to around frame 45, which would just be over 1 second, right? About 1.5 seconds, frame 45. I'm going to go to the object data for the camera, press the letter I here and the letter I here. Let me make sure my screencast keys are on for you. And that will just insert keyframes, right, for these two variables. Let's go back to the first frame and press the letter I here and the letter I here. Then we're going to press Shift and F. Shift and F key will allow us to zoom in. So we use our mouse wheel to zoom in onto this letter M. We're going to get really close to the letter M, pretty much past this particle to around here, say about here. And then we're going to press the letter G to grab the camera and the letter X to lock it on the X-axis. And we're going to lock it and get it to where it's black here. And then on the Y rotation here, we're going to set it to 45 degrees. So if we now move our cursor across the timeline, we can see the text is going to sort of do this sort of effect, right? Now what I want to do is move the camera. We can either move the camera or use a separate camera. Maybe what we'll do in this tutorial, let's see, let's first of all go to file save and then we'll decide. Let's save this as version 9. Okay, so I want to add actually a second camera. I wasn't planning on doing this, but let's add a second camera. Let's show you how this is done. So let's untick the record button. Let's go back to the first frame. And on the first frame, let's add a marker. So we're going to click add marker. So we've got this marker here. Let's just stretch this timeline up a little bit. You can see the marker here. So we're going to go back to marker here. And let's click on this camera. Make sure the camera is selected. And then click here and then say bind camera to marker. Now you can see camera is written here. So when we move across the timeline, we can get to frame 46 here. And what we're going to do is press Shift and A and add a second camera. So we've got a new camera here. It's called camera 001. So let's just call this camera, let's call it camera. So it'll be really camera right. Camera right. And on the timeline, we're going to go back and add a marker. Click add marker. And then this time we're going to select the camera right and go to marker and select bind camera to marker. And what we want to do is now click on camera, this right camera, go to its object data, and the first thing we want to do is set the X location to 0 for now, and then on the Y, let's just move the camera backwards so we can see what's going on. So we can see we move the camera backwards. Really we want to move this camera to the right hand side, so we want to move it on the X location. Let's move it to the right, and then we want to rotate it. There's a few different ways you can do this, right? You can use like the fly camera mode, or you can use these tools here. Now we want to rotate it on the Z axis, so we want to rotate it around this way, so it's facing sort of this angle, and then we're going to move it on the X. Let's just move it backwards a bit here, and what we'll do is press Shift and let's see, let's move it actually, let's press Shift and F so we can move the camera using the fly mode. So let's rotate the mouse wheel inwards. Really what I want to do is try and get the camera to sort of be, really I want to move it to the left more. Let's move it to the left more, like this. And then I'm going to press G to grab the camera, G, and then move it to the left, or to the right should I say. And I want to kind of get this letter C here and have the particles fly past, but I want to grab it and move it to the bit more to the side, because as these particles as it swishes camera, I want to see the particles fly past, but really I want to see this part here as well. So let's press G to grab the camera. Let's move it to, in fact maybe we won't worry about that too much. Let's see, let's think about this, maybe around here. Let's see. I'm not convinced I want to see this big red, big green lighting here. So what I'm going to do is actually grab the camera and move it here towards here. Let's press Shift and F and rotate it more around this direction, more to this angle. Then press G to grab it and just move it. I want to move it to like here. So we might have to move the camera back a little bit. Let's see. I think that's okay. I just want the camera. So really what we've done is we've added two cameras. The first one's going to deal with all the frames between 0 and 45, right? And then it will switch to this new camera because I wanted to see the particles kind of like fly past like this. And when it gets to around here, let's say frame, where are we? Frame, what we might do, because I don't really want the camera to be still. So what we might do, between frame 46, so let's hit the record button, let's click on this right camera, let's go to the object data, and for the X and for the location rotation press the letter I. So I here and I here, that's going to insert a keyframe in frame 46. So by frame, let's say around frame 90, around here, we'll press the letter I here and the letter I here. And let's go back to frame 46. Let's make a slight movement on the camera. Maybe we'll move it slightly. Let's have a think. Should we move it forwards, backwards? But let's press Shift and F. In fact, let's press G to grab it. Let's move it to the right a little bit, to around here, and then press Shift and F, and let's zoom in a little bit to about here, so the letters cut off slightly. So then as it moves around, it's going to kind of zoom like this, something like this. So here we've got this part, and then on frame 91 we need to decide, do we stick with this camera and move it, or do we switch to a different camera? Let's see. So let's middle mouse click and let's just rotate. Maybe we could do a camera that kind of does this, right, as the particles fly around the back. They're going to be flying around towards the back. So what we could do is insert another camera here. So let's press 0 for now, because this is where our camera is. We could use this camera in theory to do that rotation angle, but maybe we will use a new camera. Why not? Let's press Shift and A, and let's insert another camera. So we've got another camera here. It's called camera 001 again. Let's call this camera pan or something. Yeah, it's going to pan around. Now we need to move that camera, but first let's mark it. Let's go to marker, add marker, and then go to marker and select bind camera. So it's going to bind this pan camera. Now clearly we can't see where it is, so let's see. Let's set the Y rotation and the Z rotation to 0. And what we'll do is let's just move back on the Y here. And what I want to do, let's get it so that we can see most of it. Yeah, let's get it so we can see all of the text. We want to bring it a bit more forward. We don't want this cut off light here, because that's where the floor is. So we want to bring it forward past that. And let's go to the object data and press the letter I here and the letter I here to insert a keyframe. And let's say around 2 seconds, right? Maybe less. Let's see how. Let's actually get it so we can see these particles coming from this side. That's around frame 160. Let's call it 170 is a good number, right? 170. Let's press the letter I here and the letter I here. So we've got keyframes. Let's use this button here to jump back to that first keyframe, or this particular keyframe, and we're going to position our camera. So what we'll do is move the camera. We'll probably do it from here actually. So on the X, we want to move it to the side, and we just want to rotate it on the Z this way. Try and get that letter C quite close to this edge. Then we can go to the other side and move it in the opposite direction. And let's just check on that last one. Let's go back to this keyframe here. Let's just see what we rotated. Let's rotate it. We rotated it 17 degrees, right? So if we go forward, let's rotate it minus 17 here. Minus 17. So on this X, we've got to bring it back to around here. So let's see what that looks like. I think it's getting a little close here, so let's move it slightly out a bit. And then we've got this this object here, right? So maybe from frame 171, let's go to frame 171. Let's untick the record button for the minute. Let's insert another camera, so press Shift and A and insert another camera. Let's call this camera left. It's going to be on the left hand side. Then we want to add a marker for it, right? So let's click add marker and then bind camera. So now we've got one on the left side. So let's set the X to 0 and then let's move it on the Y out a little bit so we can see it. And then we want to move this to the left hand side. So let's shift it to the left and we can see this object coming around the corner, right? So I want to rotate it on the Z axis this way. And let's press G to grab the camera. Let's move it closer to this object. Let's say around here, maybe as it's coming around this corner. I want to rotate it more actually. So let's press Shift and F and move to the right more, and then press G to grab it, and maybe around here, something like around here. So let's see. So as it's doing this pan, it's going to switch. You can see the object coming around the corner there. It's going to switch here. You can see the particles flying off this way. And then we're at the end of our scene here, right? So between here and here, maybe what we want to try and achieve, let's say between here, I reckon here in frame 250, we want to try and get our camera all the way back to the front again. This particular camera, let's pan it all the way back around to the front. So to do that, what we should do first is go to frame 171, hit the record button and press the letter I. Make sure left camera is selected, press the letter I here, letter I and letter I. So we insert keyframes. Let's save our work. Let's save this as version 10, I think. Version 10. And let's go right down to frame 250. And now we just got to move our camera so that it's nicely positioned in front of this object. So to do that, what we can do is set the Z to 0. That will be the rotation, right? So that should be facing. And then the X, we can set that to 0. And let's see, the Y, we should set that to 0 as well. And then this Y, we can just move it backwards. And we'll be back to the front view again. And you can decide where you want it exactly positioned. Do you want it quite close? Do you want it further away? You want to make sure the floor, you want to make sure there's no cut-offs here. So you want to bring it forward past the floor. You could, in theory, raise the camera up a bit and then rotate it down slightly to maybe this sort of angle. I think it looks pretty good, and try and get it all centered out nicely, right? The top and the bottom all centered out nicely, so we can see what's going to happen here. It's going to switch here. Something like this. Let's just play that out from the beginning. Let's untick the record button. Let's go file, save, and just play it and see what it looks like. So I think that's looking pretty good. Obviously we can spend a lot more time tweaking and getting our animation sequence perfect, but I think this is going to be pretty good. The one thing I need to double check is when we get close to the end here, really all the particles, let's go to frame 249. Let's press F12 to render. Let's see what we see. So we see a handful of particles there, but I think that should be okay, because on the obviously on the last frame, all of those particles should disappear really. All of the particles have gone. So let's go to File, Save. Now the nice thing you can do in here is, if you're not into this green color, you can easily go to the spotlight here, click on the spotlight, click on the color. Now you can just change it to a blue. You can change it to any color you want quite quickly. You can change, and if you don't like that green, just switch it to a different color. Very easy, very easy. If you pick a color and you want to move back to green, just press Ctrl Z and it will move it back to the green color. Let's go back and play one more time. Now I think we're good here. One thing I want to check is around here, let's just make sure none of these objects are being rendered, because on the particle controller we turned it off here, can you see, in the render. And then inside here we've got the particle emitter, and inside the emitter we told it not to show emitter in the render here, turn it off. So we shouldn't see them. We shouldn't see it here either. And we need to bake our particles before we render. But let's just see this particular view. And we don't see, all we see is particles here, right? And we see the nice reflection off of them and stuff like that. So it's looking pretty cool. Let's see what it looks like in the final render. Let's go to File, Save. Wise thing to do is click on this particle emitter and click Bake All Dynamics. Click on the bottom one, click Bake All Dynamics. Go to File, Save. I'm going to go back to the first frame. I think everything in here is pretty good. Let's go to the render output. Let's set this to AVI JPEG here. Let's click on the open folder. Let's go to my desktop. Let's go to here and we just click accept. And now all we've got to do is press Ctrl and F12 to start rendering out all the frames. So let's do that. Let's press Ctrl and F12. I'm going to pause this video, and once it's finally rendered, we'll check out the final animation sequence. Okay, so Blender's finished rendering out all of the 250 frames. We can see 250 up here. Let's close this down. Let's go to File, Save, and let's go back to our first frame. Yep, we're good to go. Let's minimize this and open up this folder. So inside this folder, we've got our little AVI file. Let's open that and check out the work. Okay, let's open that and leave it on repeat so we can see it a few times. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this. I think there's quite a few different ways we could improve it, but overall, as a good test example to work from and to gain knowledge from, especially with the particle system, that's something I didn't know before, and I had to kind of learn how to do that. I was quite interested in doing something like this, because now you can make more complex particle systems like that and get them to follow paths. That was quite interesting for me. That's kind of one of the key things I wanted to learn in this particular exercise that I was doing. It's really about getting the particles and multiple particle systems to follow a specific path. We can see how they're rotating like this. You can do some really interesting stuff. If you go and watch like things like Disney intros or some sort of, you know, cartoon based sort of animation intros, a lot of them will have a lot of particle systems, especially like Disney, right? There's a lot of particle systems in there. So be interesting to maybe create something like this, but more advanced particles in there. Maybe those particle systems could be doing different things or using multiple ones. We didn't use that many particles in this particular render. I think it's like 1,000. So for that duration, it wasn't a huge amount. But I think it came out pretty well. I'm quite happy with it. I think it looks quite cool. It's definitely different, something I haven't done before. So I like the reflections as well, and the shadows and all that stuff looks good as well. So it came out pretty well. I wasn't planning on using multiple cameras, but I think that's a nice thing for you to learn, to understand that, you know, you can pick different points of the animation and pinpoint where you want your camera to be positioned depending on what's happening in your animation sequence. That's something really good for you to learn as well. So I hope you learned a lot from this. I don't think it's the most amazing sort of cinematic intro, but I think it looks pretty cool. By all means, I think, you know, it's a decent job, but I'm sure we can improve this in many different ways. So I actually will plan on making a second version of this and making it way more advanced and using some better techniques maybe to make it more advanced. But the goal was to learn how to control these particles along a path. That was one of the key things, and using multiple cameras. That's really what the knowledge that I wanted to share with you today. So let's close this down. That's the end of this tutorial. Let's close this and this. I hope you find it really useful, and feel free to leave a comment if you like this tutorial. Tell me what you like about it, and if you want me to make some more, just leave a comment in the YouTube description. Maybe show me some examples of some stuff that you like, and maybe we'll try and remake that in Blender if possible, or we'll make something new and different next time around. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you in the next DCP web tutorial.